I grew up as the family disappointment, not because I failed at anything, but because my grandfather Franklin loved me more than he loved my father George, and my father never forgave me for it. Let me explain. My grandfather built his construction business from nothing and owned several properties in our town. My dad George always assumed he would inherit everything because he was the only son. My sister Larissa was the golden child from day one, partly because she looked exactly like my mom Evelyn, and partly because she learned early that taking my parents' side in everything got her whatever she wanted. I was the quiet kid who spent weekends at Grandpa Franklin's workshop while Larissa went shopping with Mom and Dad took her to her dance recitals. Grandpa Franklin died when I was 16. The reading of the will was the first time I saw my father truly lose control. Grandpa left the family home, the one my parents had been living in for 20 years, to me, not to my father. To me, his 16-year-old grandson, to be held in trust until I turned 25. My father got a small cash inheritance and nothing else. The will stated that my father had failed to demonstrate the character worthy of the family legacy, and that I was the only one who understood the value of what was built. My parents contested the will immediately. The legal battle lasted 3 years. During those 3 years, I lived in that house as a ghost. My mother stopped cooking for me. My father stopped speaking to me except to tell me I was the reason Grandpa's mind had gone soft. Larissa, who was 14 when Grandpa died, absorbed their hatred like a sponge and made my life miserable at school by telling everyone I had manipulated a dying old man. The court upheld the will when I was 19. But here's where it gets complicated. My parents' lawyer found a loophole. Because the house was in a trust until I turned 25, and because my parents had been paying property taxes and mortgage payments the entire time, Grandpa had a remaining mortgage balance. They argued for continued residency rights until I reached the age of inheritance. The judge agreed to let them stay as long as they continued the payments, essentially treating them as tenants, who would transfer the property to me at 25. I moved out at 19, worked 2 jobs, put myself through community college, transferred to a state school, got my degree in accounting. I never asked them for a single thing. I never came home for holidays. I built my life brick by brick while they stayed in my house paying down my mortgage with hatred in their hearts. I turned 25 3 years ago, and I did something nobody expected. I let them stay. The trust transferred to me, meaning I now owned the house outright and the remaining mortgage was in my name. But instead of exercising my rights, I told them through my lawyer that they could continue living there and paying the mortgage as before. My father actually laughed when he got that letter. He told relatives I was too weak to kick them out, that I knew I owed them for raising me. My mother told her church friends that I had finally shown some gratitude. Larissa posted on Instagram about how family always comes first. They thought I was weak. They thought I had forgiven them. They had no idea that I was waiting. See, I knew something they didn't. When Grandpa Franklin set up that trust, he included provisions that my lawyer only explained to me after the transfer. The mortgage they had been paying for all those years? Those payments were going into an escrow account that became mine when I turned 25. Every single payment, plus interest. I had been building equity and collecting their payments for years without them knowing. But I waited. I wanted them to dig their own graves deeper. Last month, my patience paid off. My father lost his supervisor position at the plant where he worked for 30 years. Budget cuts. Suddenly, their comfortable 2-income household became a 1-income household, and my mother's part-time retail job was not going to cover their lifestyle. I found this out because Larissa called me for the first time in 6 years, not to check on me, not to apologize. She called to tell me that Mom and Dad were struggling and that as the homeowner, I had a responsibility to either help them refinance or take over the payments entirely so they could stay afloat. I said I would think about it. She said thinking was all I ever did, and that's why I would never amount to anything. A week later, my parents invited me to dinner. Actually, my mother texted me the address of a restaurant downtown, said we needed to discuss the house situation as a family, and that Larissa would be there too. No please, no how are you. Just a summons to discuss my property. I showed up and read it. I want you to understand something. I showed up with a smile on my face. Not because I'm a bigger person, not because I believe in reconciliation. I showed up smiling because I had spent 9 years waiting for exactly this moment, and everything I needed was already in place. The dinner started with my father explaining their financial situation like I was a bank loan officer. My mother kept interrupting to remind me that they raised me, fed me, kept a roof over my head. Larissa sat there nodding and adding comments like, "We all sacrificed for this family," as if she had contributed anything except cruelty. Then my father said it. He said I needed to pay off the remaining mortgage immediately and sign the house over to them, Oregon. I needed to evict them formally so they could collect their investment and find somewhere else to live. He said I owed them this choice at minimum, after everything they had done for me. My mother said something about me being a waste of space if I couldn't even help my own family. Larissa called me a failure and a disgrace to Grandpa's memory, which is genuinely the funniest thing she has ever said because Grandpa specifically wrote in his will that my father wasn't worthy. And I just sat there, smiling, because I had an envelope in my jacket pocket that was going to destroy everything they thought they knew. I told them I needed to review some documents before making any decisions. I told them we would have another dinner at the house this Sunday, where I would give them my formal answer. My father looked annoyed. My mother looked hopeful. Larissa rolled her eyes and muttered about how I always needed more time because I couldn't make real decisions. Sunday is 5 days away, and I am going to hand them an envelope that will make my father scream so loud the neighbors will hear. This isn't forgiveness. This isn't moving on. This is 9 years of rage compressed into a few pieces of paper, and I cannot wait to see their faces. I'll update after Sunday. Grandpa Franklin watched his own son become someone he couldn't respect, and instead of just shaking his head and dying disappointed like most people would, this man sat down with a lawyer and built a trap. He wrote, "Failed to demonstrate the character worthy of the family legacy," in a legal document. That's not inheritance language, that's a curse that gets filed with the county. And then he designed an escrow system specifically because he knew his son would try to claim equity through payments. He predicted the exact playbook his own child would use and made it backfire. That's not estate planning. That's psychological warfare from beyond the grave. And this family? They looked at a 16-year-old who just lost the only person who loved him and decided he was the enemy. Mom stopped cooking for him. You don't accidentally forget to set a plate, that's a choice. Dad's only communication was blame. Larissa ran a smear campaign through the hallways of their high school. They tortured this kid for 3 years, watched him leave at 19 with nothing, and then spent the next decade mocking him for not kicking them out. They called his mercy weakness. They posted family first on Instagram while building financial plans around property they never owned. This man got an accounting degree. You know who gets accounting degrees? People who understand revenge has compound interest. He sat through an entire dinner of insults with that envelope in his pocket like a grenade with the pin pulled. They called him indecisive while he was mentally picking out paint colors for his new living room. You can never make real decisions. He made this decision 9 years ago. Everything since has just been scheduling. Update 1. Okay, Reddit. It's Wednesday and Sunday feels like it's taking forever to arrive. But a lot has happened in the past 3 days, and I need to get this out because my family is pulling every manipulation tactic in the book, and I need you all to understand what I'm dealing with here. First, some of you asked about the envelope and what's in it. I'm not revealing that yet because honestly, I want to document this whole thing properly, and also because I need to see their faces first before I tell anyone what the papers say. Just trust me when I say it's not just a simple eviction notice. It's so much worse for them than that. Monday morning, Larissa texted me. This is the same sister who called me a failure and a disgrace at dinner, who hadn't spoken to me in 6 years before she needed something, suddenly sending me paragraphs on WhatsApp like we're close. She started with this whole thing about how she didn't mean what she said at dinner, that she was just stressed because seeing mom and dad struggle has been hard on her too. Then she pivoted to explaining that she and her fiancé, Miller, had been planning to buy a house next year, and that mom and dad had promised them they would help with the down payment once they sorted out the house situation. Let that sink in. My parents have been living in my house, paying down my mortgage, and they promised my sister money from the equity for her house. They literally made financial plans based on property they don't own. I asked Larissa directly what exactly she thought was going to happen, and she said, without any shame, that she assumed I would either sign the house over to mom and dad, or that I would sell it and split the proceeds with the family. She said Grandpa Franklin would have wanted the family taken care of, not just me. I reminded her that Grandpa Franklin specifically wrote that our father wasn't worthy of his legacy, and she told me I was being cruel by bringing that up. This is the same will that gave me the house. How am I cruel for referencing the document that defines this entire situation? Larissa then tried a different approach. She said Miller's parents had offered to help with their down payment, but Miller was too proud to accept, and if I could just help mom and dad get back on their feet, they could help her and Miller, and everyone would be happy. She actually said the words, "everyone would be happy," as if I was supposed to care about her real estate dreams after years of her treating me like garbage. I told her I would discuss everything on Sunday. She pushed back hard, saying Sunday was too far away and that mom was barely sleeping because of the stress. I said that's unfortunate and that I would see them Sunday. She started typing something, then stopped, then typed again. Finally, she sent a voice message that I didn't open because I genuinely don't need to hear her fake concerned tone right now. Tuesday brought my mother. She showed up at my apartment building. Not inside because she doesn't have access and I never gave her my unit number. But she waited in the parking garage because she remembered what kind of car I drive from a family photo Larissa had posted years ago. I came home from work around 6 and there she was, standing next to a pillar like she had been waiting for hours. She started talking before I even got out of the car. She said she wasn't there to pressure me. She just wanted to talk mother to son without George and Larissa filtering everything. She said my father's pride was getting in the way of honest communication and that she wanted me to understand their side of things. And Reddit, I actually let her talk, not because I was softening, because I wanted to hear what lies she would tell. She explained that when Grandpa Franklin left me the house, it destroyed my father. George had spent his whole life trying to earn his father's approval, and never getting it. She said my father's coldness toward me after the will reading was grief, not hatred. She said they never meant to make me feel unwanted. They were just trying to survive an impossible emotional situation. I asked her about not cooking for me, about ignoring me for years, about letting Larissa spread lies about me at school. She said she didn't remember things that way. She said I was always welcome at dinner, that I chose to isolate myself, that Larissa was just a teenager acting out. She actually said the words, "We did the best we could with a difficult situation," as if she was the victim. Then she got to the real point. She said my father would never admit this, but losing his job had broken something in him. She said he cried in their bedroom last week, something she hadn't seen in 30 years of marriage. She said if I evicted them, it would kill him. Not physically, but the shame would destroy whatever was left of his pride. I asked her what she expected me to do, and she laid it out. She wanted me to forgive the remaining mortgage balance, which is about $47,000, sign the house over to them completely, and accept that this was what Grandpa Franklin would have wanted if he had really known how much my father had suffered. She wanted me to give them my house, for free. After everything, I told her we would discuss it Sunday. She reached for my arm and I stepped back. She said she was my mother and that she loved me no matter what I decided. I said I would see her Sunday. Here's where it gets complicated. My father is not stupid. He's proud and resentful and mean, but he's not stupid. He knows my mother came to see me because he texted me Tuesday night from his own phone. Just 2 sentences. Your mother told me she spoke with you. I hope you understand this family has suffered enough. Suffered enough. As if I'm the one who caused their suffering. As if inheriting what my grandfather chose to give me was an act of cruelty against them. I didn't respond. I have nothing to say to him until Sunday. But here's the new complication. Wednesday morning I got a text from a number I didn't recognize. It was Miller, Larissa's fiancé. He introduced himself and said he wanted to meet before Sunday to make sure things don't get out of hand. He said Larissa was more stressed than she was letting on, that she had been having panic attacks about the housing situation, and that he wanted to understand my perspective before the family meeting. I've never met Miller in person. Larissa started dating him after I cut contact with the family. All I know about him is from her Instagram and from what she's mentioned in her recent texts. But suddenly he wants to meet me privately to discuss my property. Part of me thinks this is another manipulation attempt. Maybe Larissa sent him to work a different angle. Maybe he thinks he can man-to-man this situation into something favorable for his future in-laws. But another part of me is curious. Miller is about to marry into this family. He's been hearing their version of events for years. He has no idea what's actually coming on Sunday. I agreed to meet him tomorrow afternoon at a sports bar near my work. Public place, neutral ground. And if he tries anything manipulative, I can just leave. Reddit. I have spent 9 years waiting for this moment. I have documentation they don't know about. I have legal options they haven't considered. I have information about that escrow account that will fundamentally change their understanding of the last decade. And now, Larissa's fiancé wants to insert himself into the situation 3 days before the reckoning. Part of me wants to tell him everything early just to watch him go home and look at my family differently. But the smarter part of me knows I need to wait. Sunday needs to happen exactly as planned. I'll update after I meet with Miller tomorrow. Every single person in this family is running their own manipulation playbook, and they don't even realize they're all doing it simultaneously. Larissa went from failure and disgrace to WhatsApp paragraphs in 3 days. She's love-bombing him while still slipping in insults when he doesn't respond fast enough. Mom literally staked out his parking garage like a private investigator, remembered his car from an Instagram photo, and waited for hours next to a concrete pillar. That's not motherly concern, that's surveillance with emotional blackmail attached. And the gaslighting. I don't remember it that way. You were always welcome at dinner. Larissa was just being a teenager. Ma'am, you don't accidentally stop setting a plate for someone. That's a conscious choice repeated every single night. She rewrote the entire history of his childhood in real time and then asked for $47,000 and the house like she was the victim of his unreasonable grudge. But the part that really gets me? They were spending his inheritance in their heads. They had already mentally cashed the check, divided it up, promised chunks to Larissa for her wedding, talked about it like once we sort out the house situation was just a minor administrative delay. They built an entire family economy around property they never owned. Larissa's planning kitchen tiles, Miller's signed apartment leases, and none of them, ever stopped to think, hey, maybe we should ask the person whose name is actually on the deed. Dad's text. This family has suffered enough. From what, George? From living in a free house for 9 years? From facing zero consequences? The only suffering here is the emotional discomfort of not getting exactly what you wanted immediately. Update 2. Reddit. I met Miller yesterday and things have gotten more complicated. Sunday is 2 days away and my family is panicking in ways I didn't anticipate. I showed up at the sports bar around 4. Miller was already there at a high-top table near the back. He's about my age, clean-cut, the type who probably played lacrosse in college, exactly who Larissa would choose. He started by saying he appreciated me meeting him and that he knew this situation was complicated. Then he laid his cards on the table fast. Larissa had been a wreck all week. Their wedding was planned for next spring, and everything was uncertain because of the house situation. He said he loved her, but needed to understand what he was marrying into. I asked what exactly Larissa had told him about me. This is where it got interesting. Miller said Larissa described me as the family outcast who got lucky with Grandpa's will and then abandoned everyone. She told him I barely spoke to the family for years, that I had some grudge nobody understood, and that my parents spent a decade trying to reconnect while I refused every olive branch. She told him I was the problem, that I abandoned them. I asked if Larissa ever mentioned my parents stopped feeding me after the will reading, that my mother stopped setting a place for me at dinner, that my father said I was the reason Grandpa died disappointed in him, that Larissa spread rumors at school about me manipulating a dying man, even though Grandpa Franklin was sharp until his last day. Miller went quiet. Then he admitted Larissa never told him any of that. The version he knew was there was a complicated inheritance, and I responded by cutting everyone off. I told him the inheritance situation was that my grandfather chose me over my father, and my entire family punished me for it until I left. I didn't cut them off, I survived them. Then Miller revealed his real reason for meeting me. He said regardless of the past, Larissa was his future, and he needed to know if I was planning to destroy that future Sunday. He and Larissa had put down a wedding venue deposit. They signed an apartment lease assuming they would buy a house next year with help from her parents. If my parents lost the house and couldn't help with the down payment, Miller and Larissa would be stuck for years. He said he wasn't asking me to forgive anyone. He was asking if my revenge was worth derailing 4 people's lives. 4 people. He included himself in my family's casualty count before I had done anything. I asked if Larissa sent him to scout my intentions. He said no. Larissa didn't know. He got my number from her phone while she was sleeping. He needed to see what kind of person I was because her version didn't match the guy across from him. I believed him about getting my number secretly. I did not believe he was there purely out of concern. Miller has his own financial stake. If my parents lose the house, his future in-laws become liabilities instead of assets. He was there to assess the threat. I told him Sunday dinner just got bigger, and he should come since he was so invested. He looked surprised but agreed. 4th audience member confirmed. But here's the complication none of them saw coming. Friday morning, my mother texted that my father had consulted a real estate attorney. They were advised that because they paid the mortgage and property taxes continuously for 9 years, they might have grounds to claim partial ownership or establish tenants' rights that would complicate removing them. My father hired a lawyer. 2 days before Sunday, he got legal advice about fighting me for my house. He's not entirely wrong about legal complexity. Tenants' rights exist. Long-term occupancy claims are real in some jurisdictions. If this became a legal battle, it could take months. I would win eventually because I have the deed and trust documentation, but they could drag it out. My mother's text ended with what she thought was a peace offering. The attorney said the cleanest solution was for me to sell and split proceeds. They were willing to accept 60% given their years of payments. I could keep 40 and we could all move on. 60% of my house. They wanted me to sell my grandfather's house and give them most of the money. I didn't respond, saving that for Sunday. But now, if my father has a lawyer, he's coming prepared with legal arguments. He thinks this is a negotiation. He doesn't know about the escrow account. He doesn't know what's in the envelope. He has no idea what's coming. My Aunt Leah, my father's sister, called Friday afternoon. She got my number from my mother. She said she heard about the family difficulties and wanted everyone to stay civil. She said Franklin was her father too, and she always thought the will was unfair to George. But family shouldn't be destroyed over money. I told her she could come Sunday if she wanted to see what unfairness really looked like. She said she would. So Sunday dinner has grown to potentially 6 people. My parents, my sister, her fiancé, my aunt, and me, with an envelope that changes everything. They think they're walking into a negotiation. They have no idea they're walking into 9 years of planning. Final update after Sunday. Miller walked into that sports bar thinking he was going to mediate some vague family drama, and walked out realizing his entire relationship is built on a foundation of lies. Larissa told him the brother was the problem, that he abandoned them, that the parents spent a decade extending olive branches. She never mentioned the starvation, the rumors, the abuse. He's been dating an unreliable narrator for years and had no idea. You could literally see his whole understanding of this family inverting in real time. I didn't cut them off, I survived them. That sentence landed like a bomb, and then he had the audacity to ask if the revenge was worth derailing 4 people's lives. Like he's already counting himself as collateral damage before anything even happened. Brother, you derailed yourself when you made financial decisions based on money that doesn't exist. You signed leases and venue deposits based on equity from a house your in-laws don't own. That's not getting caught in someone else's revenge. That's betting on people who were playing with someone else's chips. But the best part? Dad lawyered up thinking he was about to win. He hired an attorney, got some advice about tenants' rights, and came up with a peace offering of 60%. They want to sell his house and keep most of the money, and they still don't know about the escrow account. They're planning their victory parade while standing directly on a trapdoor. He's assembling an audience now. Mom, dad, sister, fiancé, aunt. 6 people gathering for what they think is a negotiation. They have no idea they're walking into a verdict that was written before most of them knew this conflict existed. Final update. Reddit. Sunday happened. I'm writing this Monday morning because I needed a full night to process everything. My hands are still shaking, but not from nerves. From satisfaction. I arrived at the house at 5. My house. The house my grandfather built and left to me. My parents were already there with Larissa and Miller. Aunt Leah showed up 10 minutes after me. Everyone gathered in the dining room where my mother had set out a roast like this was some kind of normal family dinner. My father started immediately. He launched into his prepared speech about how he had consulted legal counsel and that any attempt to remove them would be met with a formal challenge based on their continuous residency and financial contributions. He said they had documentation of every mortgage payment, every property tax, every repair. He said his attorney was confident they could establish equitable interest in the property. I let him finish. Then I asked if everyone was ready to hear my decision. My mother said she hoped I had thought carefully about what family means. Larissa said she hoped I wasn't about to do something I would regret. Miller sat quietly, watching me. Aunt Leah said she was there to make sure things stayed civil. I pulled the envelope from my jacket and placed it on the table. I told them the envelope contained 3 documents. The first was a detailed accounting statement from the trust that held the property until I turned 25. I explained that when Grandpa Franklin created the trust, he included a provision that any mortgage payments made during the trust period would be deposited into an escrow subaccount rather than going directly to the lender. This was his way of ensuring that whoever lived in the house couldn't claim they were building equity through payments. My father's face changed. He asked what I meant by escrow subaccount. I told him that every single mortgage payment they made for 9 years went into an account that transferred to me when I turned 25. The payments reduced the principal balance on the mortgage, yes, but they also accumulated in a separate account that became mine. I had access to over $87,000 in accumulated payments plus interest. My mother asked how that was possible. They would have known about this. I explained that the trust was structured so the mortgage servicer received payments normally, but a portion was redirected per the trust terms. The servicer was legally bound by the trust provisions. Grandpa Franklin set this up specifically because he knew my father would try to claim the house through financial contribution. He made it impossible. My father stood up from his chair. He started saying this was fraud, this couldn't be legal, he would sue. I told him the second document was a letter from my attorney confirming the legality of the trust structure and the escrow provision. Grandpa Franklin's estate lawyer had drafted it specifically to withstand exactly the kind of challenge my father was threatening. Every payment they made was technically rent that accumulated for my benefit. They had been paying me for 9 years without knowing it. Larissa grabbed the envelope and pulled out the papers. She started reading and her face went white. She asked if this meant all the money they thought was building equity was actually going to me. I said yes, every cent. They own nothing. They had built nothing. They were tenants who thought they were homeowners. My father started yelling. He was screaming that his own father had set him up, that this was a trap, that Franklin had planned this from beyond the grave. He was so loud, I'm genuinely surprised the neighbors didn't call someone. My mother just sat there breathing fast with her hand on her chest. I told them the third document was a formal notice to vacate. They had 60 days to leave the property, not 30 because despite everything, I wasn't trying to make them homeless overnight, but 60 days and not a single day more. After that, I would begin formal eviction proceedings. Larissa threw her plate. It hit the wall and shattered. She started screaming that I had destroyed her life, that she and Miller were counting on the down payment help, that I had taken everything from her. I told her she never had anything. She had expectations based on property that was never hers. She had built her future on my inheritance, and now she was learning what that actually meant. Miller stood up and told Larissa they needed to leave. He looked at me and said he understood now why I had invited him. He said he wished I had told him all this at the bar, so he could have prepared Larissa. I told him some lessons need to be learned in person. Aunt Leah hadn't said a word through any of this. Finally, she asked me if I felt good about destroying my own family. I told her I didn't destroy anything. Grandpa Franklin saw who these people really were. He saw how they treated me. He built this trap because he knew exactly what they would do, and he wanted them to face consequences. I was just the one who got to deliver them. My father was still standing, still yelling about lawsuits and lawyers and challenges. I told him he was welcome to try, but that he should know I had 3 years of market rate rent I could countersue for, since I technically let them stay after the trust transferred. 3 years of back rent on a house this size in this neighborhood would be over $60,000. His choice whether he wanted to fight and risk owing me even more money. He sat back down. My mother finally spoke. She said I was just like Franklin, cold and vindictive and incapable of love. I told her Franklin was the only person in this family who ever actually loved me. And now I had his house, his money, and the pleasure of watching them realize they had spent 9 years paying for their own destruction. I left the envelope on the table and walked out of my grandfather's house for the last time as a visitor. Next time I enter, it will be as the sole occupant. They have 59 days left. Miller texted me this morning that he and Larissa are reconsidering the engagement. My aunt hasn't reached out. My parents are apparently already looking at apartments. Grandpa Franklin, wherever you are, I hope you're proud. I finally delivered what you set up all those years ago. This is what 9 years of patience looks like. $87,000. They spent 9 years making payments, thinking they were building a legal case for ownership, and every single cent went straight into an account for the kid they were abusing. Grandpa Franklin didn't just predict his son would try to steal the house through payments. He weaponized those payments. He turned their greed into their own destruction. Every check they wrote thinking, this is evidence, was actually a deposit into their grandson's revenge fund. That's not estate planning. That's a masterpiece. Dad came in hot with his lawyer talking points, listing every payment like receipts at a returns counter, genuinely believing he was about to win. And then his face changed when he heard escrow sub-account. You could literally see him processing that his own father had outmaneuvered him from beyond the grave. Franklin knew George would try this exact playbook. He saw the future and built the countermove into the architecture 20 years ago. Dad screaming, this is fraud. This was a trap. Yeah, George, it was a trap. Because your father knew exactly who you are. Tenants who thought they were homeowners is the most devastating sentence I've ever heard. They lived in this house for a decade, mocking their son for being too weak to evict them. And the whole time, they were just paying rent to the person they treated like garbage. Larissa threw a plate and screamed that he destroyed her life. She never had anything. She built wedding plans and house plans on a fantasy, and now she's acting like a victim because reality finally showed up to dinner. Miller lasted 12 hours before reconsidering the engagement. One dinner, one throne plate, and he's already doing the exit math. And when the aunt asked if he felt good about destroying his family, he didn't destroy anything. Franklin identified the rot and designed its removal. The grandson just executed the will. Literally.